Hello guys and gals, imagine that you haven't had much luck in life, and in an effort to give your existence a new direction, you stumble upon a new city to live in that offers incredibly cheap accommodation complete with hot springs. The only catch is that they say it's haunted, but that doesn't matter because you have psychic powers to eliminate the ghost. Except that the ghost is a beautiful girl who lives with other supernatural beings in the hotel, and they all appear as beautiful girls too. What a tricky situation. Now let the story of Yuna and the haunted hot springs begin. We begin by observing a beautiful girl who appears to be a specter. She is ascending towards the sky, but a boy tries to catch her, although he fails, and in the end, she vanishes amidst memories of what seems to be an intimate relationship between them. After the opening, we meet the protagonist of the story, Kogarashi, who embarks on a new adventure in the city of Yukamuri. In this city, we see some residents approaching a man claiming they saw a faceless woman, but when the man turns around, he too has no face, which frightens the residents. At that moment, our protagonist appears and delivers a punch, sending him flying into the horizon. Afterward, he introduces himself as a psychic or physical medium and explains that the entity was actually a mischievous ghost. The residents are grateful and inform him that he should not stay at the Yuragi Hotel because it is haunted. The protagonist assures them that there's no problem since he can send any ghost flying with a single blow. Kogarashi arrives at the Yuragi Hotel and finds it perfect. As night falls, our protagonist goes to bathe in the hot springs of the inn. Suddenly, a woman enters and starts undressing. Sensing her presence, our protagonist realizes she's a woman and begins to scream, causing her to scream as well, levitate, and throw flying barrels at him. Before losing consciousness, he realizes that she is a ghost, but being a woman, he can't hit her. When he wakes up, he finds himself lying down and attended to by Chitose, the hostess of the inn. At that moment, a semi-naked woman named Nonko appears and offers him some sake to drink. In the shadows, another person named Sagiri emerges, indicating that she is in charge of discipline at the place and scolding Nonko for wearing that kind of clothing. Suddenly, from under the blanket covering Kogarashi, another girl with cat-like mannerisms named Yaya comes out, stating that she likes hot places and that's why she was there. She begins licking the wound that Sagiri caused the protagonist. The protagonist is confused by seeing so many beautiful girls. They ask him which room he will be staying in, and he mentions that it is room number 4. They lament what will surely happen to him. When he enters his room, he finds a bottom half of a girl sticking out of the wall, and he starts pulling her legs, realizing that she is the ghost of a girl. She explains that she hid there because she felt embarrassed and didn't want to scare him. When he finally manages to pull her out, she falls down and lands on his face, asking him to start over, introducing herself as Yuuna, the ghost of the Yuragi Hotel. They begin to talk, and Yuna asks if he can see her as she truly is because normal people can only see a white shadow at most. He tells her that he can, causing her to feel embarrassed, remembering that he saw her naked in the hot springs. Kogarashi doubts that she is a bad ghost because she's an innocent girl, but the problem is that sooner or later she must ascend to heaven or else she will become an evil spirit. She tells him that she is bound to that room so they will live together, and she apologizes if her presence bothers him. During the night, they stay awake, and he tells her that since he was young, he has been possessed by ghosts, which cause him many problems, and that's why he became a medium to defeat all the evil spirits. She listens and thanks him for coming because everyone fears her, and nobody wants to talk to her. Suddenly, a little mouse falls and Yuna gets scared, causing everything to levitate, including the protagonist who falls on top of her, uncovering her breasts, and as a result, she throws him out the window into the river. The next day, Kogarashi goes out to find part-time work. On his way back home, he thinks of Yuna and blushes. Suddenly, he glimpses a glimmer in the distance that worries him, and he runs towards the inn. Yuna is being exorcised by a monk who says he will send her to heaven since she lacks malice. But suddenly, Yuna says she doesn't want to go and wants to stay because she met a friend and wants to get to know him better. At that moment, Kogarashi appears, breaks the spell, and declares that he won't allow her to be exorcised and that he will help her ascend. The monk is knocked unconscious by the protagonist's blow. He tells Yuna that he will help her so she won't go to hell, and she tearfully expresses her happiness that someone cares about her. The monk starts to regain consciousness, and our protagonist tells him to go elsewhere, but accidentally grabs Yuna's breast, causing her to throw him out the window again, this time into the bath, where the other girls from the inn were naked, and a commotion ensues as they start beating him up. We begin at dawn seeing Kogarashi with Yuna floating in the sky because she is dreaming of joyful things while she embraces him, revealing her personality. Suddenly, she wakes up and they both fall back into the hot spring bath. After the opening, Kogarashi is having breakfast with Sagiri and Nonko. He is surprised to see that they can all see Yuna and begins to suspect that they may also be ghosts. Nonko approaches him and hugs him with her enormous breast to show that she is alive. Meanwhile, Sagiri asks Kogarashi, holding a knife, if anything happened between him and Yuna in his room. Yuna blushes and denies it, but Nonko insists that her expression indicates otherwise. Sagiri threatens Kogarashi and tells him to go live in a hole, but he refuses and declares that he will stay and help Yuna avoid going to hell. Suddenly, Chitose appears and offers to give him breakfast but warns him that he only has 1 month to pay for the food or else he will starve. As this conversation unfolds, Yaya emerges from under the table in her underwear, revealing a cattail, which surprises Kogarashi. Sagiri becomes angry and threatens him with a knife. Outside, a scream is heard. It is the monk who declares that he has studied the lodging and that it is a house filled with wicked people, whom he will exorcise. One of his disciples reminds him not to use violence, pointing out that he only sees women. The monk decides to capture them for study, and his disciples begin to have sexual thoughts, imagining them being whipped. They start to attack, but Kogarashi tells the girls to hide while he protects them. Sagiri takes out steel spikes and begins to attack, revealing that she is a ninja exorcist. Yuna assures Kogarashi that there's no need to worry because Sagiri is skilled. Nonko finds herself in the middle of the monks and reveals her demonic heritage by summoning a horn. With her strength, she curls one of the disciples at the others like bowling pins. It is then revealed that she is a descendant of the demon king and becomes stronger when she is drunk. A giant cat controlled by Yaya appears, and they mention that she is possessed by a cat god. Finally, Chitose uses her power to bring good news to all the disciples, causing them to abandon their exorcism work. The monk also receives good news, and they all leave happily. Yuna tells Kogarashi that she is a protective deity of the hotel, capable of manipulating luck, and is the oldest among them, having taken care of and watched over the hotel for a long time. At midnight, while Yuma is asleep, she puts her butt on Kogarashi's face, and upon waking up feeling so embarrassed, is thrown out of the window. The next morning, when Yuna and Kogarashi leave the room, they find a cat. Kogarashi pets it, thinking it's cute, but the kitten resists and escapes, transforming into Yaya, who appears dead. Sagiri becomes angry and punishes her with punches. Later, during the lodging meeting, Chitose announces that there is a request for Kogarashi to leave. However, if he passes some challenges, he can stay. Otherwise, he will face punishments. The first challenge is a ping pong game. Yaya teams up with Sagiri, and they start playing, but Kogarashi surprises everyone with his skill and successfully returns the ball with the help of Yuna. They are on the verge of winning when Yuma starts having embarrassing thoughts, activating her power. Sagiri and Yaya take advantage of this and gain the upper hand. However, Yuna uses her power to make everyone levitate, leading them to victory. Sagiri promises not to kick him out again, but he slips and accidentally touches her breasts, resulting in Sagiri and Yaya hitting him. The next morning, Yuna wakes up and can't find Kogarashi. She starts screaming and searching throughout the house until Chitose explains that he went to the school's entrance ceremony. Meanwhile, at the school, Kogarashi is excited about his new school life when suddenly Yuna appears behind him, equally excited. In class, Yuna curiously lifts up a classmate's skirt, causing Kogarashi to look bad and everyone to assume he has powers, getting him into trouble. Yuna explains that she was only curious about the uniform and wanted to try one on. Kogarashi tells her that clothing is part of the human spirit, but she always remains naked. She blushes and imagines herself naked, and suddenly she appears in the classroom, causing everyone to levitate. When Kogarashi calms her down, everyone falls back with bumps, thinking it was a result of magic. The teacher enters and asks everyone to introduce themselves. When it's Kogarashi's turn, he says he's a medium, and that he has a ghost with him who will cause trouble in the future. This causes everyone to laugh and mock him, but he doesn't pay it any attention and continues with the class. After school, Miyazaki, the girl with the lifted skirt, asks to talk to him. She explains that what he did was rude, but that she needs his help because strange things are happening in her house. A ghost torments her and causes objects to levitate. He agrees to help her, and they go to her house. Once there, they see that her room is filled with many stuffed animals. Miyazaki explains that they are possessed, and when Kogarashi tries to hit them to release the spirits, she punches him, thinking he is attacking her stuffed animals. He then assumes they must be talismans and asks Yuna to check inside one of them. When she does, she gets scared and makes Kogarashi levitate, causing him to fall on Miyazaki and touch her, leading her to believe he's a pervert and kicking him out of her house. Later that night, Miyazaki reflects on what happened, and suddenly the stuffed animals in her room start undressing her. Through the window, Kogarashi enters and stops the possessed plushies, remembering the plan he used with Yuna earlier that day. He takes Miyazaki out of her room through the window and brings her to the park, where they encounter a mysterious person with a female voice who throws a leaf, transforming into a monster that attacks Kogarashi. However, he stops it with a single blow, and the mysterious person turns out to be a girl who is a tenduki. She pleads for forgiveness, introducing herself as Koyuzu Shigaraki, and explains that she placed leaves on the stuffed animals to study Miyazaki and help her learn to behave like a human, completing her transformation like others in her tribe. Kogarashi asks what's missing, and she mentions that she needs breath. She reveals that in the presence of a medium, she cannot complete her transformation, so Miyazaki agrees to help. They open her chest and she feels embarrassed, blaming Kogarashi for seeing her breast. Later, they agree to let Koyuzu stay at the inn with the other girls. The next day on their way to school, Kogarashi meets Miyazaki, who thanks him for his help and gives him cookies. She even thanks Yuna without noticing her presence, making Yuna happy. Miyazaki tells Kogarashi that she won't accompany him to school to avoid causing him more trouble. One night, a demon that feeds on people's hair is seen. Suddenly, Sagiri appears and throws her steel kones at it. After defeating the demon, she mentions that the job of exorcists is to eradicate cursed spirits. Later at school, Sagiri is seen attending the same school as Kogarashi. People consider her eerie, but she approaches our protagonist to talk with him on the rooftop. She explains that she wants to assign him a job as a ninja exorcist to deal with a yokai. During the night, a couple of boys bother Sagiri, and she retaliates without much consequence. Afterward, she asks Kogarashi to wear the civilian clothes she brought and tells him that a yokai uses mist to trap its victims, leaving them to devour their pheromone-infused clothing. Kogarashi realizes that if they are dressed, they might also end up. Sagiri threatens him with a knife again for imagining them making. Sagiri explains that the demon humiliates women and she's willing to do anything to exterminate it, even seeking Kogarashi's help. As time passes, she blames herself for the yokai not appearing because she doesn't look very feminine. To make her feel better, Kogarashi suggests that they act like a couple, hoping to attract the yokai. Sagiri reluctantly accepts and grabs his arm. Suddenly, the monster appears and Sagiri jumps to observe the source of the mist. The mist tears her clothes, but Kogarashi punches it away, revealing the demon. This helps Sagiri perform the exorcism, but it drains her of energy and she falls completely onto Kogarashi. Later, she thanks him and he tells her she's cute, making her blush. The next day, Sagiri is seen repeatedly greeting herself in the mirror, trying to make an effort to appear more feminine, even though it's not her forte. Then Yaya is seen on the rooftop with a giant cat, and from a distance, Kogarashi yells at her to come down and eat. When she hears him, she gets up, slips, and falls. Kogarashi rushes to her aid, but the giant cat god, Nekogami, catches her mid-air and saves her. At breakfast, Chitose announces that she will be going on a trip to a hot spring guild, and they agree to take turns cooking. They say their goodbyes all happy, until Yaya serves them cat food on the first day. On the second day, Nonko gives them nothing but junk food. On the third day, Yuna cooks, and the food looks delicious, but since she can't taste it, it ends up tasting horrible because she mistook soy sauce for cola. On the fourth day, it's Sagiri's turn to cook, but she only prepares medicinal food which they refuse to eat due to its terrible smell. Finally, on the fifth day, the protagonist cooks delicious charcoal-grilled salmon. Everyone is amazed, and he explains that the spirit of the legendary chef possessed him to learn cooking so that the art wouldn't be lost. Yaya becomes infatuated with him. The following day, Yaya chases Kogarashi everywhere and everyone wonders why, but she doesn't respond and continues doing so for a while. Later, the protagonist takes a hot bath thinking he'll be safe from his stalker, but to his surprise, Yaya is there and offers to wash his back. Unfortunately, he accidentally turns on the hot water, which wets and angers Yaya. Then, Yuna heals his wounds and they realize that Yaya has been following him because she wants him to cook the salmon again. That night, he cooks fish for her again, and she gives it to the giant cat god, causing both Yaya and the god to develop affection for Kogarashi. At school, Miyazaki approaches Kogarashi and starts asking about Yuna. Kogarashi blushes and tells her that Yuna is there. Miyazaki asks if she can take a photo, but Yuna refuses because she doesn't like being photographed. Miyazaki thanks her for helping and Yuna writes on a piece of paper, discovering a way for them to communicate. Later that same day, Yuna gets closer to Miyazaki. Miyazaki takes advantage of the situation to gather information about Kogarashi through Yuna, telling her that all men are bad and she should be careful with him. On that day, Miyazaki tells Yuna that she can touch her to see what it's like to wear the school uniform. Yuna starts undressing her, thanking her, while Miyazaki feels a bit embarrassed. After Yuna finishes, she thanks her for helping, but Miyazaki becomes curious about Yuna's face. She takes Yuna's hand and brings it close to her face, realizing that Yuna is very beautiful as she touches various parts of her body. Suddenly, Kogarashi interrupts, and in the commotion, Miyazaki falls on top of Yuna, giving the protagonist the wrong idea about what they were doing. Back at home, Yuna shows Kogarashi that she can transform her clothes into a school uniform. He says it's perfect, and Miyazaki convinces Yuna to take a photo. In the photo, she appears as a white shadow, but Miyazaki makes some adjustments and filters to make her look better. On the same day at the inn, Nonko comes out of a hot spring bath when a young man approaches her. He mentions that he works for a magazine and they have an important assignment to present the next day. He explains that Nonko's assistant is hospitalized, so he couldn't complete his last task. Kogarashi and the young man decide to help her. They spend hours and hours on the job, and at one point, Nonko poses for a scene and asks Kogarashi to take some photos as inspiration and reference. They suggest that she needs more drama and ask her to lift her skirt, for work purposes only. They get carried away and touch her until they end up on the bed. In the meantime, they ask her to wear women's clothing for additional references, and the work continues. Kogarashi notices that Nonko never drinks alcohol while working. She starts telling him about her past as an exorcist and how her life changed after a terrible incident. She tried to fit in anywhere before becoming a manga artist. After this revelation, they continue working and finish the assignment. The next morning, when they finish the work, Nonko celebrates by drinking and says she deserves it. Once again, this scene is misinterpreted as the other girls arrive and see Kogarashi's face buried in Noko's chest. Nonko wants to celebrate and starts taking off more clothes while scolding the protagonist. In the morning, we see Chitose preparing breakfast. Kogarashi leaves with Yuna for school, but contrary to expectations, Chitose enters her room and comes out dressed as a middle school student. Kogarashi quickly runs back to the hotel for his gym clothes, but Chitose uses her power to make herself invisible so he doesn't see her and discover that she has been going to school since last spring. Now in middle school, Chitose excels in English, painting, mathematics, and other subjects because she appears to be 13 when in reality, she is much older and has already studied these topics. After school, some boys bother Chitose and her friends, forcing them to go with them. Chitose uses her luck power, causing her tray, which had been thrown, to return to its original state. Additionally, when a boy grabbed her arm, she cursed him, and then Kogarashi appears, scaring off the boys. Luckily, he didn't recognize Chitose. That same night at the inn, Chitose returns to her usual duties. The next day, Yuna and Kogarashi go to a hot spring out of curiosity. A few days earlier, while changing a light bulb, Yuna had thought about what she would like to do, and Chitose gave them tickets to a hot spring as a gift. At the hot spring, they contemplate sleeping together in the same room. Kogarashi tells Yuna that he will treat her like a princess since it's their first date. They enter the facility and mention that they have a double ticket. Kogarashi explains that he is with a girl only he can see, and everyone looks at them with fear and confusion. Inside the hot spring, Yuna surprises Kogarashi by wearing a swimsuit. He confesses that he doesn't know what to do on a first date, so Yuna explains her wishes. But everything seems impossible because the hotel only allows couples to engage in certain activities. They decide to go down a water slide together and Yuna goes first. When she reaches the bottom, her swimsuit breaks due to the water pressure and Kogarashi slides down behind her. They fall into the water close together and she becomes embarrassed, pushing him away again and leaving him unconscious. Later that day, Kogarashi wakes up and they decide to visit a thermal pool in the same hotel. They still feel awkward around each other. Yuna mentions that if everyone wore swimsuits, they could bathe together at the inn. Kogarashi responds that it would be a bad idea. Afterward, Yuna thanks him for making an effort to give her a good first date and expresses her desire to do it again. He agrees, thinking that he would also like to repeat it. We start with some girls on the street approaching a man to ask for help taking a photo with their camera. The man mistakenly thinks they are trying to seduce him, although the reality is different. The man refuses to listen to reason and exclaims that he accepts them as his concubines. He tries to carry them away, but before anything else happens, another man hits him on the head, scolding him. In their conversation, we learn that the young man with white hair and an eye patch who hit him is named Oboro, and the perverted man is Genshiro. Strangely, the young man speaks with great respect to the other. After the opening, we see Yuna waking up in the morning again in the protagonist's bed in a compromising position, feeling embarrassed. Later, she tells the other guests that she feels embarrassed and sad because she always gets thrown out the window. She jokingly suggests jumping out herself, but Chitose offers her a jar of soy sauce as a way to alleviate her embarrassment. Yuna comments that she looks like a wife in that situation. Koyuzu then suggests that Yuna accompany her for her first assignment, and she gladly accepts. Later, Genshiro and Oboro head to the hot springs in search of a wife who meets Genshiro's expectations. They see Yuna with Koyuzu, and Genshiro believes she could be a suitable wife. Yuna uses her power to repel him, but he doesn't give up. Through his power derived from his scales, he dries his wet clothes, but Yuna rejects him again. Koyuzu shouts that she is Kogarashi's wife, and Genshiro carries Yuna away through a portal, warning that cruel fate awaits anyone who follows. After that, Kogarashi and Sagiri find Koyuzu crying. She tells them what happened, and Kogarashi decides to rescue Yuna. However, Sagiri stops him, explaining that the dragon is a very powerful being, and you won't be able to defeat him alone. Sagiri decides to accompany him. In the castle, Genshiro starts changing Yuna's clothes and appearance, telling her that she can never escape from there. However, she expresses her refusal and states that she doesn't want to stay. Oboro makes Yuna reflect by suggesting that she shouldn't stay with Kogarashi, since he brings her bad luck. As Kogarashi and Sagiri approach the castle, they hide from the guards and devise a plan to not only rescue Yuna, but also ensure they won't come after her again. Sagiri wears an extremely revealing outfit, and just as a guard passes by, they hide in a narrow crevice, pressed closely together. Suddenly, Koyuzu sneezes and chaos ensues. Sagiri starts knocking out the security guards and they infiltrate the castle. Kogarashi separates from Sagiri and provokes Genshiro, leading to his capture. Meanwhile, Sagiri tries to find Yuna's whereabouts. We begin by seeing Kogarashi inside the castle as a prisoner before Genshiro. The latter explains that he doesn't need a body to have children and that Yuna's soul would be enough for procreation. He also asks if Kogarashi has kissed Yuna. Kogarashi is surprised and responds that he hasn't, but then realizes he can buy some time. He tells Genshiro that they've done everything else except that. Meanwhile, Sagiri and Koyuzu manage to reach the room where Yuna is imprisoned, and she is surprised to see them. However, before she can be freed, Oboro strikes Sagiri from behind, injuring her. Koyuzu has to escape while the others stay to fight, and we see Sagiri struggling against the evil enemy. We now switch to the room where Kogarashi is held captive. Oboro enters with Sagiri and Yuna, both unable to move, and proposes that Sagiri becomes one of Genshiro's concubines. Genshiro, with his twisted thoughts, accepts. Sagiri asks Kogarashi to give up, but Yuna speaks up and says she will marry Genshiro if he releases their two friends. To infuriate Genshiro and halt Yuna's idea, Kogarashi claims that he bathed together with her. This prompts Genshiro to deliver a brutal kick that sends him flying, something that would have killed an ordinary person. Astonishingly, the protagonist rises from the ground and declares that if Genshiro doesn't release the girls, he will take them by force. His opponent and his disciples laugh, but the protagonist strikes a blow that sends him flying. Apparently, a powerful medium spirit possessed him at some point, giving him great power. Witnessing this, Oboro starts to remember. In the flashback, we see baby Genshiro, and his mother asks Oboro to care for and protect the Ryuga family. Back in the present, Kogarashi demands that Sagiri and Yuna be released, but Oboro opposes and attacks Kogarashi. When Kogarashi deals a strong blow to Oboro, her clothing on the chest area tears, revealing her breast, surprising her opponent to discover that she's actually a woman. Oboro, with a smile, says she can't strike a girl and counterattacks with her sword. In the midst of the fight, she tells Kogarashi that they could have formed a strong family together. She starts cutting Kogarashi's clothing, but suddenly Nonko stops the sword, and the other girls from the inn appear just in time to help him. However, Oboro resists and says that none of them will leave as they will all be concubines. She even hints that Kogarashi should marry Oboro. Fortunately, the protagonist explains that he can't have everything by force and that he is stronger than any of them. Oboro reluctantly agrees but expresses doubts that Genshiro will accept, to which the protagonist tells her that he has a strategy. Genshiro wakes up confused, and Oboro explains that he defeated Kogarashi, and the girls ascended to heaven after falling in love with such a magnificent being. Genshiro accepts it and even cries for the girls. Yuna feels ashamed for causing so much trouble and thinks it would have been better if she had gotten married. However, Kogarashi tells her that she has people who love her, and he will make her happy. Everyone returns home. That same day, Oboro appears in Kogarashi's bed, startling him as she is completely naked. He asks her why she's there, and she responds that she came to conceive a strong child with him. Both the protagonist and Yuna can't believe it. Miyazaki decides to visit Yuna and Kogarashi at the inn, although she hesitates at first. She enters and sees Oboro on top of him, completely naked. Miyazaki is surprised and screams in shock. Everyone is delighted and surprised by the visitor, while Oboro leaves since her plan was foiled. Miyazaki stays at the inn for the whole day, getting to know each of the girls and engaging in conversations with all of them. As a token of gratitude for the warm welcome, Miyazaki cooks for them, and Yaya loves the fish she prepared. Later, all the girls are naked in the hot spring bath, and they begin to discuss Miyazaki's popularity. Oboro, who was also present, asks for advice on how to attract Kogarashi, clarifying that she only wants to conceive a child and is content with being a concubine. Miyazaki gets scared and asks her not to pursue that path. As night falls, Yuna and Koyuzu prepare beds for the two of them to sleep with the guest. Koyuzu demonstrates that her transformation has improved, turning into a beautiful woman and simultaneously making Yuna and Miyazaki more seductive and daring. However, the two of them blush and cover themselves, refusing to repeat the experience. In the end, Koyuzu expresses her gratitude for what they have taught her and advises them to try being that way in front of Kogarashi, but they adamantly refuse. That same night, while everyone is asleep, Yuna falls asleep on top of Miyazaki, and the latter gropes her breast. However, Yuna pushes her away and half asleep asks her not to leave. Kogarashi, half asleep as well, tells her not to move and exposes Miyazaki's breasts, leaving them exposed. Miyazaki tries to distance herself, but Kogarashi grabs her underwear, causing her to lean forward towards Koyuzu, who wakes up and kisses one of her breasts. Miyazaki recoils and turns her backside toward the protagonist, and when she stands up, she falls forward, awakening Kogarashi. The first thing he sees is Miyazaki's backside, leaving her in complete embarrassment. To avoid further embarrassment, Miyazaki pretends to be asleep and Kogarashi covers her with the blanket before getting under the covers himself. At that moment, Oboro enters and tries to get on top of him again, but the protagonist stops her and tells her that he will only do it with the person he loves. Oboro says she will make him fall in love with her. Miyazaki leaves the inn, but before she goes, she leaves a message for Yuna, advising her not to sleep on top of others half-naked, as it might one day tempt even Kogarashi. At school, we see how everyone in Sagiri's class is excited about the upcoming beach trip, but she is worried. Her classmate Yurara notices this and offers to go shopping with her, so that she doesn't feel embarrassed about her unfeminine tastes. Initially, Sagiri refuses, but Yurara convinces her and asks her to bring Kogarashi as a guest. Sagiri is surprised, but it turns out that Yurara is actually from another ninja clan and tells Sagiri that she needs to get to know Kogarashi better because despite his incredible power, no one knows much about him. Later at home, Kogarashi remembers all of his bad experiences and promises himself that this time will be different. He asks Yuna to accompany him, which is due to a previous incident where Sagiri was practicing how to invite Kogarashi shopping in her room, and when she tries it for real, she yells at him, but he still agrees. The next day, they meet Sagiri's friend, and Kogarashi tells her that he is curious about the yokai they will face. Apparently, Sagiri deceived him. The friend follows the plan without giving Sagiri away and takes them to a store to try on swimsuits. Sagiri comes out of the dressing room wearing a swimsuit that covers almost everything, like a prisoner. Her friend tells her she'll bring another one, even though Kogarashi had already told her she looked great. The friend says that Sagiri needs to be more aggressive with her style, and one by one starts trying on increasingly provocative swimsuits. Sagiri starts to think that the swimsuits are not for her, but her friend tells her not to say that because she has a perfect body and starts grabbing her to prove it. In the midst of this, they fall, and Kogarashi enters the room due to the noise, finding them on top of each other. He runs away as Sagiri starts throwing her spears at him. Later that night at the lodging, Sagiri looks at herself in the mirror wearing the chosen swimsuit and feels beautiful. The next day, on the way to the camp, Yuna starts talking to Miyazaki, and they get upset when they hear someone saying that ghosts don't exist. They arrive at the beach and Sagiri decides to go into the water. Then Miyazaki, Yuna, and Kogarashi appear with a raft to join her, and it's there that Sagiri reveals that Yurara, her classmate, is also an exorcist ninja. Soon, everyone is seen having fun and underwater. Tentacles snatch the girls' swimsuits. Kogarashi intervenes and starts cutting these tentacles. He goes deeper into the sea and with a powerful punch makes the yokai disappear, causing the girls to be released and fall naked into the water. Back on land that evening, Miyazaki recounts how astonishingly Kogarashi defeated the yokai, but her classmates tell her not to trust him so much. However, she doesn't let those comments sway her, and instead wants everyone to know that Kogarashi is a medium and a very good one willing to save and help those in need. To make that happen, Miyazaki starts devising a plan to show Kogarashi's bravery. At night, the plan begins, which involves Yuna scaring her classmates in the forest, followed by Sagiri and Yurara summoning a demon for the protagonist to fight and demonstrate his strength. But to Miyazaki's misfortune, Yuna gets scared in the forest, and then Sagiri and Yurara start fighting each other because Yurara wants to challenge the demon Shikigami from her clan against the protagonist to test his strength. Sagiri falls on top of Kogarashi, and just when the plan had already failed, a loud noise is heard. A diabolical yokai appears before two students, ready to devour them. The two schoolmates go around saying how much of a fraud Kogarashi is for claiming to be a medium when they are suddenly frightened by a yokai they accidentally awakened. Just as the monster is about to devour them, Kogarashi's arm comes to their rescue. Our protagonist confronts the beast and it tries to eat both Kogarashi and his arm, but its teeth start to break. Just when everyone thinks Kogarashi will fight back, he kneels down and apologizes for breaking the seal, forcing everyone else to do the same. The beast realizes that he possesses greater power and chooses to return to the seal peacefully rather than fight. His classmates express their gratitude for saving their lives, and they continue their journey to the camp. Kogarashi declares that he doesn't care about the mockery and that he will continue to do good. He appreciates their willingness to help him, but when Miyazaki tries to hug him, she falls and he accidentally holds her breath. Later at the camp, all the girls enjoy a naked bath in a hot spring. Afterward, as they leave, the boys want to go to their rooms, but the teachers guard the accommodations. Suddenly, Kogarashi appears at the window with his friend on his shoulder, claiming he climbed all the way up. They knock on the door and everyone hides, but to their misfortune, it's the inspecting teacher. Kogarashi, Sagiri, Yuna, and Miyazaki are seen hiding under a sheet. Yuna feels extremely uncomfortable and starts to move away, but Kogarashi hugs her, causing her to feel embarrassed. This leads to everyone levitating, and in a quick maneuver, Kogarashi grabs his friend and jumps out of the window to avoid being seen by the teacher. The next day, Kogarashi and Yuna are at an aquarium when two classmates approach them and ask if he has invited Miyazaki to dance. He denies it, and they walk away excited because they think they have a chance. Kogarashi notices that Yuna becomes sad, thinking that he will dance with other girls. On the same night, Kogarashi asks Yuna to dance, making him appear crazy to his classmates because they can't see the ghost. The next day, back at the lodging, Oboro arrives and finds everyone studying, but she still exposes her breasts and rubs them against Kogarashi. When she doesn't succeed, she leaves the room. Meanwhile, Yuna asks Chitose if she can cook, and Chitose agrees. On the other hand, Oboro seeks advice from Koyuzu, who suggests a love potion. Later, Nonko enters the room eating an ice cream and wearing a very revealing swimsuit, claiming it's out of respect for Kogarashi. In another room of the lodging, Chitose is studying while Yuna cooks, and Koyuzu and Oboro bring the food. Before serving, they secretly add the love potion to the dishes and give them to Kogarashi, Sagiri, and Yaya. They wait for the potion to take effect on someone. When they realize that Sagiri seems to be affected by the potion, she becomes confused and believes it's because she has feelings for Kogarashi. She avoids him to the point of hitting him and threatening him with her blades. But suddenly, she regains her sanity and admits that she feels really bad because he doesn't see her as a woman. Then she starts and he tells her that he sees her as a cute girl. Overwhelmed with emotion, she hugs him tightly and doesn't want to let go. When the effect of the potion wears off, she feels so humiliated. Koyuzu mentions that the potion only works if you have feelings for the other person. Oboro realizes that Sagiri has feelings for Kogarashi. Sagiri remains embarrassed in her room, unable to believe how foolish she appeared due to the potion. In the morning, we see how they wake up and Kogarashi accidentally touches Yuna as usual. She feels embarrassed and throws him into the river again. That same morning, almost all the girls say goodbye as Koyuzu is going to sleep over at Shizaki's, Sagiri is going to her ninja villa, Yaya is going to a festival, and Chitose is going to another hotel convention. Nonko receives a call saying that her assistant has caught a cold. She needs to finish a manuscript for this month's issue, so she asks the boys for help and promises to take them on a trip to Okinawa, to the beach. Days later, they appear on a beach where Nonko shouts that they deserve it for delivering the manuscript on time. She mentions that there is a romantic story on that island when suddenly Oboro comes out wearing a tiny bikini. However, Yuna convinces her to wear a slightly more covered one. Nonko asks Kogarashi to apply sunscreen on her back, and Oboro, as always, tries to find a way for Kogarashi to touch her and also requests sunscreen. Yuna, looking sad, makes Kogarashi offer her sunscreen too if she agrees. However, our protagonist stumbles and accidentally touches him, causing Yuna to react and throw him far away. But thanks to this, he detects a ghost on a cliff. Later that day, Nonko tells the story of the ghost he saw, saying that the couple separated due to an accident the boy had. Yuna becomes sad because she says waiting alone or being alone is very difficult. This is when Kogarashi decides to help that ghost by sending her to her beloved. They arrive where the ghost is and ask her if she knows where her boyfriend is. She points out that he is on the other side of the highway but cannot go there because she is trapped in that place. They approach the boyfriend and he tells him that he doesn't approach her out of fear. Due to his recklessness, she jumps into the sea to save him and they both die. Kogarashi explains that both of them must reunite, otherwise they will become evil beings. But despite this, the couple fails to reunite. They then decide to force them to meet. Their plan is for both of them to worry about each other to the point where they leave the place that binds them and can be together. This works, and they meet. The angry bride starts hitting the groom, but he embraces her, and their souls are finally able to rest in peace. Upon seeing this, our protagonist realizes that he still hasn't figured out why Yuna still has something unresolved and asks if she could tell him about her life. However, she apologizes and says she doesn't remember anything, not who she was or how she appeared dead. This doesn't surprise Kogarashi since he realizes that all the spirits he has encountered always talk like crazy about their lives, but she doesn't. Yuna then tells him that she has no regrets because she has good friends who help her every day. In the morning of that day, Kogarashi has a vivid dream of Yuna being exorcised. It seems to be the past, and some monks call her a corrupted soul. The dream is terrifying, but then he tries to grab her to save her. When he realizes it, he wakes up and is touching Yuna's breast, causing her, as always, to throw him out the window. But this time, she tries to catch him before he falls into the water. However, they both end up falling, and underwater, they hold hands. It is there that Kogarashi decides he will never let go of her. Later, at sunset, Yuna tells Kogarashi that every day she wakes up next to him is the happiest day of her life, and Kogarashi says he won't let her become evil, and that he will be with her until she rests in peace. Back at the lodging, the girls are bathing together, and once again, Kogarashi appears flying in front of all the girls and sees Miyazaki completely naked. He receives punches from all of them. However, he says that those mornings with Yuna are happy. This is how the season ends, but let's continue with the OVA episodes. Kogarashi once again wakes up and Yuna is on top of him, but this time she's asleep. She accidentally smothers him with her breath, and when she realizes it, she makes everything levitate and throws Kogarashi. Yes, you guessed it, out the window. In the kitchen, Chitose is seen chopping vegetables when suddenly Kogarashi and Yuna enter and offer to help. Chitose accepts and our protagonist rushes off to set the table. Meanwhile, Yuna stays behind lamenting with Chitose about throwing Kogarashi again. Chitose tells her that he doesn't mind and hopes he stays in the inn for a long time. Suddenly, Kogarashi enters the kitchen and asks Yuna to accompany him to the girls' room to let them know breakfast is ready. The first room belongs to Nonko, who opens the door with her exposed and wearing a robe. As she approaches Kogarashi, he asks Yuna to tie her rope, but they end up getting entangled. The second room belongs to Sagiri, but they find her near a waterfall wearing transparent clothing. Kogarashi doesn't dare disturb her concentration, slips, and falls. Sagiri hears the noise and attacks him with her steel spikes, thinking he's a peeping Tom. He denies it and only tells her to fix her clothing, which embarrasses her, leading her to attack him again. Finally, the last room belongs to Yaya, who is seen sleeping on the roof. Yuna approaches to wake her up, but the cat next to her startles her, and as she feels herself falling, Kogarashi rushes to her rescue. However, she remembers that she can fly and Kogarashi ends up falling alone. Once everyone is gathered at the table, they enjoyed breakfast. Suddenly, Kogarashi asks for more and Yuna offers to help, but she drops the plate, and in her attempt to save it, she falls on top of Kogarashi and her rear ends up on his face. Later, on her way back, Yuna says goodbye to Kogarashi and wishes him luck at work. Upon returning to the inn, Yuna and Chitose devise a plan to give Kogarashi a joyful welcome by showcasing the blooming cherry blossoms, a local attraction. That night, when Kogarashi returns home after work, he only finds a cat at the inn. The cat leads him to a field where he finds the girls, who invite him to toast and give him a warm welcome, showing him the beautiful cherry blossoms. Kogarashi declares that he won't leave the inn, especially after experiencing all of this. He expresses his gratitude for their efforts, and soon everyone is sitting at the table, having fun. Then a new story unfolds, which takes place shortly after our protagonist moves to the hotel. One morning, Kogarashi is seen cleaning the hot springs when suddenly Koyuzu, half asleep, enters and wants to take a bath. Due to her grogginess, she mistakenly turns Kogarashi into soap. He tries to make her understand that he's not soap, but without a voice or limbs, he is at the mercy of the others. One by one, the girls start entering the bath. Yuna and Chitose arrive, searching for him but unable to find him. Yuna starts using the soap that he has turned into. Kogarashi becomes foam and starts moving across Yuna's body. Suddenly, the other girls enter and do the same, and Kogarashi begins to feel sensations from all of them. Kogarashi starts to worry that the soap will run out and he will disappear completely. At that moment, Chitose enters and prepares to take a bath, talking about how good Kogarashi is at house chores. Suddenly, Koyuzu, still half asleep, undoes the spell and the protagonist turns back into a human. Although he is grateful that they can see him again, the girls are embarrassed and Sagiri starts attacking him with her kunai. We start another new story that takes place when Sagiri agreed to let Oboro live with them. One morning, Oboro is seen underwater in the waterfall and Sagiri arrives because it's her training spot. She asks Oboro what she's doing there and tells her that she's not welcome at the inn. Oboro replies that she's there because she wants to have a child with Kogarashi. Sagiri explains that this is the problem and that she can't behave that way. Oboro insists that she knows she can't force it and her goal is to make him fall in love with her, so she asks for advice. Sagiri says she doesn't know much about approaching guys, and Oboro is surprised because she thought Sagiri would have a lot of success being so beautiful. The ninja is taken aback by the compliment and accepts that Oboro can live with them since she's probably not a bad person. Later that day, Yaya is seen feeding the kittens, returning to the inn. On her way, she meets Oboro, who is thinking about how to seduce Kogarashi. Oboro asks Yaya how to make a guy fall in love, and she suggests preparing a good meal. In the kitchen, Oboro and Chitose prepare a meal with the intention of making Kogarashi fall in love. However, Oboro is so clumsy that she breaks the table in half and causes a lot of damage to the kitchen. Nevertheless, she manages to prepare a meal for Kogarashi. Oboro, back in her own world, seeks advice from her servants on how to seduce Kogarashi. They respond that as long as the man is stronger, women will always show attraction. Upon returning to the inn, Oboro asks Nonko for advice on how to enchant guys, and Nonko replies that men are pigs and only seek her for her. Oboro then asks the other girls for advice, and each one gives her different suggestions. Koyuzu tells her that by touching her, they can grow bigger, so Oboro tries, but without success. Afterward, Oboro, along with Yuna, is in the hot springs, and she tells Yuna that she's tried everything but hasn't seen any results. Yuna tells her that falling in love is more about making a connection, which strengthens over time. At night in Kogarashi's room, he wakes up to find Oboro on top of him, and she says that the more frequent the contact, the more positive the effects will be. Yuna sees this and nervously tells her that wasn't the idea she wanted her to understand. Our next story is about Miyazaki. It starts at her house when she wakes up and sees Koyuzu touching one of her breasts. Apparently, little Tanuki is under her care for those days, so they have breakfast together and Miyazaki's mother feels very comfortable with Koyuzu and finds her tail cute. She tells Koyuzu that she will sleep with her tonight since she's only staying for a day. The girls talk about how the little one should go out more, but she can't because she hasn't mastered transforming into an adult yet. Miyazaki's mother suggests that since she's only staying for a day, they should have a whole day of outings and shopping. When they arrive at a lingerie store, Miyazaki tries on a bra, but she needs Koyuzu's help, which ends up embarrassing Miyazaki. Later that night, Miyazaki's mother washes Koyuzu's hair while talking about the inn and how people, including Kogarashi, aren't as bad as they seem. She also mentions that she would like to be like Miyazaki because she has a mother who is proud of her. Miyazaki arrives and joins in washing Koyuzu's hair. After they finish, they go to bed and Koyuzu, half asleep, calls Miyazaki's mother Mom. The next day, Koyuzu says she feels very comfortable with them and asks to visit again since they don't see her as someone who hasn't transformed yet, but rather with a lot of affection. They agree, and Koyuzu happily returns to the inn. This fun summer story shows us Kogarashi during a fair representing the restaurant where he works. Everyone is celebrating a date when prayers are offered to cat gods to bring good fortune. Suddenly, the protagonist sees flying cat spirits, but apparently he's the only one who can see them. Suddenly, Yaya appears on one of those cats and tells him that she wants to buy the okonomiyaki he's preparing as it looks delicious. When she tastes it, she falls in love with his food and asks him to come with her after work, so she can introduce him to the cat gods. Night falls and our protagonist goes in search of Yaya. Upon arriving at the location, a cat appears and tells him that Yaya has spoken a lot about him. The cat starts explaining the celebration and then leads him to the room where Yaya is. Upon entering, he finds her in her underwear. She asks him for a favor, to prepare his delicious fish. He agrees and feeds the cats, while in the background, Yaya starts her dance and the cats seem to attack her, but she's actually playing with them through her dance. Suddenly, the ceremony is interrupted by the entrance of a huge, muscular, and troublesome cat named Aramaki. He was previously humiliated by Yaya because she dominated him with a cat feather toy. Yaya confronts him and Aramaki starts scratching Yaya's clothes, leaving her semi-naked. In defense of Yaya, all the cats start attacking this enormous cat since he was cheating by wearing glasses to not see the toy. Kogarashi helps and throws a small stick at the glasses, knocking them off and allowing Aramaki to see the toy and become mesmerized. Yaya thanks Kogarashi and asks Aramaki to play with her again next year. A happy ending for the cats. The next story takes us to Oboro and her efforts to make the protagonist like her. One morning, Yuma is sleeping alone in Kogarashi's room and feeling sad. During breakfast, the girls say that she can fly and go see him, but Yuna prefers not to interfere when Kogarashi is working. Then, Oboro says that it's also difficult for her to make Kogarashi fall in love with her, and that now she's looking for a loyal love with him. She asks Miyazaki to be her love mentor since she sees that Miyazaki is sought after by all the guys. Upon realizing this, Yuna and Koyuzu also want Miyazaki to teach them. Later that day, Miyazaki teaches them to be feminine, but Nonko intervenes and dresses them like idols to support her manga. They also see it as an opportunity for Kogarashi to see Oboro differently. Then they ask Miyazaki what a date with Kogarashi would be like even though she's not interested in him. They plead with her to imagine it, and she begins by saying that they would go to school together and have lunch together, making everything as natural as possible. In that moment, Oboro reveals her plan with Kogarashi, and throughout the time, she only thinks about being with him and having babies. They then interrogate Yuna because apparently Kogarashi is very close to her, and they seem to be in love, but Yuna denies everything. Suddenly, they start thinking that Kogarashi is not interested in any woman who is close to him. However, they remember that he talked excitedly about an idol group that was going to perform with another classmate, so they assume that his absence in the inn is because he's going to idol concerts. Later that same day, Kogarashi enters the inn and is welcomed by Chitose. But as soon as he enters the room, he hears a lot of noise and sees that the girls Oboro, Yuna, Miyazaki, and Koyuzu are singing like idols. When Kogarashi enters, they become embarrassed, except for Oboro, who shows him her underwear and asks him if he likes what he sees. We start this episode with powerful images of our protagonist lying in bed due to a curse. All the girls are gathered around his futon, and several of them are surprised to hear Hibari, the friend of our house ninja, saying that poor Kogarashi will die unless he sees 12 different women's panties. Sagiri explains that they were hunting a powerful spirit that casts spells, and they encountered Kogarashi. He helped them, but before the spirit was defeated, it cursed him. The girls and Sagiri's clan companions have no choice but to accept the curse to save him. Sagiri is the first to muster the courage and lifts her skirt from a distance. The problem is that the protagonist can hardly see well due to his illness, so the ninja has to get closer despite her modesty. Then it's Yuna's turn, but they start arguing about who goes next, so Yaya, Oboro, and Nonko take the opportunity to show him their garments. Next in line is the squad of girls, so despite their extreme embarrassment, both Chitose and Urara and Koyuzu show theirs. Then one of the new girls, Mikogami Matora, takes her turn, followed by Miyazaki. Finally, only Yuna, Hibari, Sagiri's cousin, and Karura Hyoji, a new girl, are left. The three are surprised that Miyazaki is so beautiful, so Karura goes crazy and runs to sit on the alien protagonist. After showing him hers, Hibari forcefully removes Karura and does the same, but to raise the stakes, she unfastens her pants in front of him. Finally, Yuna approaches the protagonist and lifts her clothes, but she's not wearing anything, and the curse seems to disappear. However, another mark appears, asking her to show her bra. That's not all. The narrator tells us that another requirement follows. They have to for the protagonist. The next story introduces us to two new girls. It starts with the protagonist and Yuna returning from shopping. When they encounter these two, invite them for dinner. One is Cheyenne Todoroki and the other is Haruma Yumasaki, the latter claiming to be a succubus, but desiring a normal life. Before the protagonist can start dinner, Hibari suggests that they all take a bath and Karura overhears everything from a distance. In the bath, Koyuzu is with another new girl named Miria Katsuragi, a very cute cat-like yokai. The two girls find some forbidden bath salts and ignore the warnings from the others, pouring them into the water. When Chitose and the protagonist finish cooking, they say it's time to go to the bath. Although our hero hesitates a bit, Chitose assures him not to worry because everyone will use towels. The inn's manager arrives first and sees that the water is pink. She becomes worried, but since everyone seems happy, she joins in. At that moment, they explain that they poured all the salts, and she can only scream for everyone to get out quickly and for Kogarashi not to come near. But then there's a loud noise and bam. Everyone seems to have lustful red eyes. Before Chitose loses her sanity, she explains that they were aphrodisiac salts and the girls have been in the water for too long, so they've lost their minds. Immediately, Oboro grabs the protagonist and takes him to her room through a portal, but Hyobi saves him and takes him to her room to do whatever she wants. Before anything happens, Yuna's power saves him, but she still takes him to her bed. Yuna is about to offer herself to the protagonist for the first time when her modesty kicks in, and she sends him flying out the window despite the aphrodisiac. The one who saves the protagonist is none other than Yaya, Miyazaki, and Urara. Once again, it seems like things will escalate. The other girls discover them and use the succubus power to put them to sleep. The chaos continues, and finally, Hibari and Sagiri arrive to capture him, but Koyuzu and her yokai turn them into plush toys. Chitose arrives and tries to save him, but slips and falls into the pink water with him. The protagonist emerges in love with Chitose, and the girls also jump into the water, but Kogarashi seems to be able to resist the effects. In the end, the narrator tells us that nothing happened that night thanks to the protagonist's strong willpower. Phew, what a heated ending. After the end credits, we can see a short scene where Yuna pulls Kogarashi out the window, but manages to stop him before he falls into the water. They both say that even though with his new power he may be able to break the seal of his memory, she actually wants to stay with all her friends forever. They end up gazing at the horizon in a beautiful sunrise. Could it be that we'll get more Yuna stories in the future?